Hi there, James Rowe here, presenter of the Which Cars podcast. Join me and the Which Cars team as we cover the biggest motoring stories, including our exclusive research into car reliability.
When 5 to 9 year old cars break down, they spend on average 4 days off the road. New to 4 year old cars spend 4.8 days off the road. Now that might not seem like much in the general scheme of things, but that's a 20% difference. And that could be the difference, for example, if you break down on a Monday afternoon between getting your car back for the weekend or having to wait into the next week to having it repaired.
Should you buy a used car rather than a new one?
Unless you're desperate to get a car in exactly the colour or specification you want, there are plenty of low mileage used cars on the market with significant discounts on their new price. And if they're from a brand, say like Toyota or MG, which offer long warranties, then it can actually be quite a good option buying used because you'll still have that manufacturer cover behind you.
And why are car headlights so bright nowadays?
Car manufacturers want to make life easier for the driver, so they add these LED or laser headlights that illuminate the road ahead like never before, which is great if you're driving a car. Not so great if you're on the receiving end coming the other way.
To listen to the full podcast, head to which.co.uk/cars podcast. You have to be a Which member to listen, but you can get a membership for 50% off the usual price. All the details are on that page, which.co.uk/cars podcast. Hello and welcome to the Which Shorts podcast. I'm James Rowe. Thanks for joining me. Each week on the podcast, we delve inside one of the Which magazines, choose a piece that was written by one of our brilliant journalists and bring it to life, giving you loads of free, everyday advice. This week, we're heading to the allotment. In the February edition of the Which Gardening magazine, our no-dig expert Charles Dowding gives us his best advice on how to get the most out of your veg patch. Here's his piece, adapted for the podcast, this week read by John Weeks.
Calling all green-fingered gardeners in 2025, we've got some top tips for you when it comes to planning a new veg plot. Whether you want a veg patch in your garden or you've just taken on an allotment, here are some key insights to help you make the most of your future crops. So, first up, choosing a plot. If you have a choice of plots at an allotment site, open ground is best, meaning there's no competition from trees taking away light and moisture. Yes, trees do create a shelter belt, but when it comes to your veg plot, extra wind is better than having trees too close to it. Another key factor when it comes to your plot is finding one with level ground rather than sloping, however a slight slope is fine. Being close to any source of water is good as it'll save you time and effort in dry weather, a tap being the most convenient, but a nearby water butt does the job just as well. Next, are hedge surrounds a problem? Well, the big potential issue with hedges is the same as trees. Their roots will take moisture out of the soil during the summer months. The trick to working out how far the woody roots have spread? Envisage a 45-degree line from the top of them to the ground level. That'll give you a rough guide on how far-reaching they are. If there's a choice, take a plot as far as possible from any hedges and trees. If you're near either, the roots will keep growing and sucking moisture and nutrients from the soil, so your veg will never do as well as they would in open ground. Now, should you worry about weeds? Well, the answer may surprise you. Don't be put off by a weedy plot. Strong weed growth is a sign of good soil health, and there are only a few different types you need to be aware of. Those with woody stems like brambles will need to be cleared out, as well as horsetail, simply because it's super persistent and takes a long time to beat. To manage it, you just need to repeatedly remove it. And when it comes to brambles, there's no need to remove every single root. Just get rid of the stems where you see them appearing above ground. Use a sharp spade to cut diagonally underneath them and lift out about 10 to 15 centimeters of the stem. For all other weeds you want to get rid of, add mulch on the surface using sheets of cardboard, overlapped by 10 to 15 centimeters so the weeds don't push up between them. Then cover with any kind of decayed organic matter on top. Even a rough compost will do at this point. Keep topping up the mulch as it rots down and regularly pull out weeds that do appear. If you're consistent, you can beat even tough weeds like bindweed without chemical sprays. And as you're using mulch, use it on paths as well as beds. Wood chip is a good option for paths, as it's usually available for free from tree surgeons. Next, remove any wooden sides. This is a top tip to avoid slugs gathering on your plot. If the plot already has beds, remove any old wooden sides and don't install new ones. It'll lead to fewer slugs as they won't be able to hide under the bed edges. Now, which bed size is best? We recommend 1.2 metre wide beds with 40 centimetre pathways in between. At that size, the beds are wide enough to make full use of the space, but the middle is still comfortably reachable from either side while staying on the path. With the exception of any need for physical disabilities, pathways of 40 centimetres are wide enough for both access and pushing a wheelbarrow. So, what else is there to be aware of with your plot? With no dig, it's easiest when beds are running up and down a slope, not across it. So the compost and water you add run down the bed and not onto the path below. A north-south alignment is only needed if tall plants like Jerusalem artichoke, runner beans and sweet corn are your main crops. Most veg though are low growing and aren't tall for very long, so they won't shade each other. And now for the must-haves for any keen veg grower with a plot. A small greenhouse or polytunnel. They offer you the opportunity to sow earlier and have harvests for more months. They also help to produce better, tastier cucumbers, peppers and tomatoes in the summer and nicer salad leaves in the winter. A water butt, having just one based by the shed or greenhouse will do, from which you can collect rain runoff. Butts are useful for the small amount of water you need for new plantings, but be aware they soon empty in dry weather, typically when you really need water. And a compost heap. Having 1 or 2 compost heaps gives you the opportunity to convert waste into compost for mulching. That is a vital tool for any no-dig plot.
This week, John Weeks was reading that piece, originally written by Charles Dowding and published in the February edition of the Which Gardening magazine. To read it in full, then be sure to become a Which Gardening member. There's a link in the show notes for you to find out more. We'll be back again next week for another episode of Which Shorts, but don't forget that you can also listen to the Which Money podcast every week, where we give you a dose of personal finance news every Friday. Just search for Which Money wherever you're listening. Which Short was produced and edited by John Weeks, while the exec producer was Samara McCarrath.
If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.